Hey guys, welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. Happy to be joined today for our Chargers and Ravens preview by Ken McKusick, who is the host of the Film Study Ravens podcast, fellow Blue Wire podcast network member. Ken, thanks for taking the time to join me today. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Steven.
Yeah, really excited. We just did an episode with Ken on his show, which went really well. So make sure and check that one out. Ken, I think every single episode I always like to start with the quarterbacks. And you tweeted out something that was pretty similar to something that I tweeted out about the Ravens passing attack and how it's really evolved over the last year and really gone into a more downfield attack. So what has kind of led to Lamar's kind of evolved development in that regard that's allowing him to have so much success throwing the ball downfield?
Yeah, it spends a lot of time in the offseason working with Josh Harris, a QB coach that's done a lot of things for him that are very positive. And just going to camp this year, you can see his release, very tighter spiral. He's thrown some longer balls this year. Against the Lions, they averaged 19.3 average depth of target, which is ridiculous. But beyond that, it's the highest since they've been keeping that in 2016. So the 6-year period and whatnot. He's probably close to the league lead in ADOT. He may still be there right now. Took some shorter throws in this last game against the Colts, but definitely that's been a big difference. The Ravens been much less afraid to take the lid off the defense and throw downfield. They will take what they give you, I think, as you'll see. So in the Colts game, even though they threw some deep balls and he was 8 out of 8 beyond 10 yards, which is nice. He was also very effective beating the inside linebackers. So they crossed and they used some checkdowns, which is very unusual for the Ravens in terms of trying to beat those inside linebackers.
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch. And I think it's interesting because if you on paper look at this matchup, you probably think that Justin Herbert is the one who leads the league in ADOT, but it's actually Lamar Jackson. So it is an interesting thing there. He is their leading rusher right now as well. Mm-hmm. How is he able to gain all of these yards on the ground? Is it more of what we've been used to with the RPO action? Is it more scrambling? What can you tell us about the QB run game for the Ravens this year?
Right. So the QB run game, in 2019, it was really run out of pistol for the entire thing. And that led to situations where he would typically be the runner threatening one edge and they would leave an edge defender unblocked, where he would have to make a difficult choice. And usually Mark Ingram that year was the up the middle back, and they would also have some sort of option, maybe a jet motion guy or whatever that would be headed in the other direction. Now it's really run more behind counter. So they'll have two linemen pulling from one side to the other, left guard, usually left guard, left tackle, but it may also be left guard center, and they also run from right to left some. They run that out of sidecar, and so the running back is the edge option on that. They usually have a jet motion as well, where you're seeing another player threatening the other edge, and Lamar's really the guy who runs it up the middle, which is a lot of the times a lot of people would not like that as an option, but the middle gets cleared out like you wouldn't believe by all the motion that Ravens present. And some of the really long touchdown runs have been exciting cases where the other team just ran themselves completely out of position. If you look at the Eagles and Redskins in particular last year, and the Cowboys as well.
So that's another thing that's changing, right? Is their run game, because you wouldn't picture Lamar as kind of an in between the tackles runner, but you're saying that's kind of the flip this year is that they're using Lamar more up the middle as opposed to out in space.
Yeah, this year and actually last year as well, when they had a lot of success with it. And with counter, you've got extra big bodies on the move, so your middle changes, and so maybe you're running kind of behind the right tackle is the way you think of it, but it's not to the edge.
Okay, so that's going to be an interesting one. We'll get to the defensive matchup in a second, because I know a lot of Chargers fans are worried about the defensive tackles in this game, but obviously the Ravens have lost a lot of running backs to injury. It's unfortunate. I was J.K. Dobbins dynasty owner this year, so that kind of sucks. It's a big bummer to see that one go down. What can you tell us about the rotation that they have going now? It seems like Latavius Murray has become that primary back. What are you seeing from the trio of running backs they like to use?
Yeah, it's not an impressive group with Murray at the top of it. Murray rush yards over expected heading into this last game was about 0.7 yards per carry less than expected. That's that Austrian model that got developed and then taken on. So a lot of people know that. They had J.K. Dobbins, who was over 1+1 in terms of expected. Lamar has always been up there, of course, near the league leaders. The model just doesn't really work for him in terms of estimating yardage in the same way. And they had other guys. I mean, Gus Edwards was a very productive, 1+1 guy. And now to have these guys who are slower, older, very limited in terms of what they can do. Murray's not a guy who really runs off tackle much. It hurts a lot. Devonta Freeman, they've been kind of using as a speed guy, and the guy who really should be the number one back if he could hold on to the football is Tyson Williams. And he's got the speed. He played very well in the preseason. He's got a good yards per carry during the regular season. The problem is he's had a couple fumbles. One of them got actually run in for a TD behind him, meaning Devin Duvernay happened to be in the right spot at the right time, pick the ball up and go in. Another one was in the backfield. The other thing that's been very disappointing about the Ravens has been their mesh point chemistry has been lousy. And so Lamar wants to be able to pull the ball for as long as possible. So you want to be able to delay through the mesh. And what that allows Lamar is to read opponent leverage in a way to pull the ball at the most opportune time. And we just saw an example in Monday Night Football right down by the goal line in overtime where it almost cost the Ravens a ball game, or it might have cost the Ravens a ball game when he had trouble pulling the ball away from Freeman, then had to go to the ground. That actually was in regulation, wasn't it? Was that the one
that they ruled Darius Leonard forward lateral, or was that a different one?
No, this was he fell on the ball, but he pulled the ball very late. It wasn't either of the two 1-yard fumbles.
Okay. Gotcha. So definitely some ball security issues, which the Chargers have been able to take advantage of, particularly against the Chiefs. So that's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. I think a lot of people have been excited about Marquis Brown this year and the kind of development that, at least in production, that we've been seeing. What have you seen from Marquis Brown and the other receivers in this game for the Ravens?
Well, the Ravens have had a good ability to just take the top off the defense, generally speaking. And there's a couple things that come into play here. Number one is they've been using more extra protection to protect for their extremely weak tackle group right now. So they have Villanueva on the left side, who's terrible. They have McCary on the right side, who's a very short-armed tackle. He's like 32 inches approximately, and he's a decent technical player. He had a good game against the Colts, but has a lot of problems. But they've been using a lot of chip blocking to try and take care of blockers on the outside that way. But what they've been doing, this effectively what amounts to max protection, is giving the play extra time to develop. Their interior offensive line has held up pretty well as pass protectors, and they've had good opportunities to let Lamar step up in the pocket, move around in the pocket, leave the pocket occasionally to make some very long throws. And I believe he also leads the league in time to throw as of right now.
That's so funny because you're just saying that the tackles are terrible and he has the most time to throw. So
it's time to throw is also dependent on the quarterback. So a quarterback who can move around a lot can create a lot of long pockets.
Yeah, very cool. So I want to ask you about Mark Andrews because I'm always curious to see how teams defend these high level tight ends. I think Mark Andrews is unquestionably one of the better tight ends in the league. If you were a defensive coach for a second, I want you to put that hat on it. And how would you try to defend Mark Andrews? Because he's different than the other tight ends in that he does a lot of his work in the intermediate to deep parts. It looks like, at least, on PFF, that's what the statistics say. So how would you defend Mark Andrews?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of cover 3 slot concepts and whatnot that could be used, kind of like a box and one in basketball, where you have a slot receiver. The obvious guy that'll shut Mark Andrews down is Derwin James. So if you put Derwin James on Mark Andrews, I think that probably will reduce his effectiveness tremendously. But you've only got one Derwin James to deploy somewhere. So where are you going to put him?
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch how Brandon Staley has used him, because against the Chiefs, they kind of mixed-matched coverages with Michael Davis on Travis Kelce, Derwin James on Travis Kelce. So they do like to move Derwin James around, but against the Cowboys, he played almost exclusively in the slot. So that is the interesting thing for the defense, I think, to keep an eye on. You mentioned the tackles, how much they've struggled. What about the interior line for the Baltimore Ravens, because I think the defensive tackle group for the Chargers has also been really up and down. Some games they're good, some games they really struggle. They got destroyed by the Cleveland Browns trio last week. So what can you tell us about the Ravens interior trio of offensive linemen?
Sure, they've been effective. Ben Powers has played pretty well. He hasn't really had a terrible game yet. He's probably about a B- level, I would put him. He was splitting time with their third round draft pick. Ben Cleveland is a very exciting, monstrous player, but he got hurt in this last game after playing just 4 snaps. He got put on IR today, and appears like he will not. He won't play for 3 games, but supposedly the news is good, at least according to him, and he's given indications that he'll still be back this season. So oftentimes you see a tweet come out from a player saying, "I'll recover from this and be stronger than ever," and then they're gone for the year. But if they say something like got positive news, I'll be back real soon, kind of thing, then you still have hope, and that's what we got from Cleveland. I love Cleveland. I think they could put him in right now at left guard, and certainly they would probably be just as good as they are playing rotationally between Powers and Cleveland. But they could also potentially might have to use him at tackle. And this is something I don't think a lot of people agree with here in Baltimore yet, but he's got long arms, so he checks off that box. Being a massive body in the Ravens system is really the primary requirement at right tackle. And they could go back to some of the concepts they used in 2019 to help with that. And he's been a good pass blocker in college. So I think there are reasons to believe he can handle a lot of concepts, particularly with chip help out there. But anyway, he's gone. Continuing on, Bradley Bozeman is at center and a fine player. He's moved from left guard last year, where he's the most prolific puller in Ravens history. But now he's at center. Had a bad game this last week. His worst of the season, as I scored it in the offensive line, but he's played pretty well otherwise, and that's been a positive. If him moving there definitely been a positive. He'd been by far the Ravens' best lineman through 3 weeks. Kevin Zeitler was signed to a deal, which is essentially, I think, a 2-year deal, but it's in the guise of a 3-year deal at right guard, and he's been pretty good. He did have a horrible game against Denver, and Denver or Detroit. I'm sorry. And otherwise has been pretty good for this season. So he's a quality guy. He's taken over a lot of the cadence issues, and that's really helped the Ravens with their snap problems from last year. So
I know that losing Marshall Yanda to retirement was a big thing last year. Has Zeitler kind of been that emotional leader for this unit, or has it been someone else?
I don't know. Couldn't tell you about emotional leaders. I'd say he's more the field general for the offensive line, that okay. He's probably making the line calls, and you look for the player who's tapping the butt of the center, and that guy is initiating your cadence after he's made his line calls and whatnot. And if the center doesn't have to do that, some centers are perfectly capable. Lindsey, big guy who could, no doubt about it, do it. But
right.
But if you don't have that guy, then you want the center to be focused on snapping and take his responsibilities off his plate.
Yeah, absolutely. An interesting center matchup in this one for sure. I want to ask you, because you mentioned Ben Cleveland and his status for this one. Are there any other offensive injuries besides, the Ronnie Stanleys that we already know about? Anyone else that either could be coming back or potentially missing this one?
So Sammy Watkins was hurt on Monday night, and we don't know anything about the severity of it. I think there's a possibility he might not play. If he's not there, Rashad Bateman has been practicing again and might be back. He was their number 1 draft pick, and a guy who is very good at the top of the route. It's a guy who makes a lot of great moves at the top of the route. We just watched a lot of very frustrating film on Anthony Averett on the defensive side of the ball. And basically, he just went through a game where he was buying whatever they were selling at the top of the route. So basically, he went for the first move and was consistently beaten, frankly, on the first move. Had his worst game as a professional after he played great for the these first 4 games. So it was really a shame to see that. But I think that Bateman hopefully will give the Ravens that kind of wiggle at the X receiver that they really haven't had.
I was going to ask you about Averett later, because the numbers from coverage this week were pretty jarring, because like you said, he had been playing pretty well in the previous 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
So that's maybe potentially a Mike Williams kind of matchup, but we'll get to that one down the road.
I was going to ask you if Mike Williams was that kind of receiver. So the Colts will have guys who really use jukes and moves at the top of the route. Is Pittman, very good at that, but Paris Campbell very good too. But is Mike Williams really a move maker, or is he a smooth route runner who just he runs a route and cuts sharply, or is he really trying to fake?
He's kind of more of a box out guy. Mm-hmm. His route running and cutting isn't fantastic. Like it gets the job done. And so kind of what you're describing is more of Keenan Allen's game or Josh Palmer's game, mm-hmm. where they're really good at the top of the route and out routes and whip routes and things like that. But Mike Williams is more of a run down the field, stop and box out because he's so big kind of player. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be an interesting one. I know that Michael Pittman was Aver the one guarding Michael Pittman when Pittman caught that jump ball.
Yes.
Okay. So there we go.
That was one of several, but yes, I was one of them.
Good stuff. I want to transition to the defense now because I think, me personally, everybody misses in draft evaluations, right? But I did not see it with Odafe Owe. I did not think that he was going to be this prolific, let alone as a rookie. Of course, landing in a great situation in Baltimore with that kind of pedigree and track record of developing edge rushers. What have you seen from him? Because the pressure numbers on PFF are outstanding.
Right. He's been very good. A whole lot of things are going on. First of all the things that were wrong going out of camp, going out of college, I saw him too. A very upright pass rusher, a lot of issues with that. Didn't get off the ball real quick. That was a problem. We're seeing his production so far is amazing. His growth even more amazing in terms of the steps he's taken. So his sack in this last game, if you go back and look at it, he's about 3 to 4 clicks ahead of all the other offensive linemen. Now I say clicks. If you do analysis using the DVR, and anybody can do this who's got the game, do a pause and then do the fast forward button. And at least on a DirecTV remote, and I think on most other remotes too, you go ahead essentially 1 frame or 1/30th of a second on a 1080i game. And if you look at that, then you'll see he's about 4 clicks or about 0.13 seconds ahead of all the other linemen. So he just had it perfectly timed up. And that get off was one of the real questions about him. So played the run pretty well. He's a great underneath stunt guy, which I would not have guessed. So, that kind of quickness, his kind of 4.4 and a little bit better speed, you'd expect him to be a great looper, but he's a great underneath guy and his gravitational pull for the other offensive linemen. The reason is that because he's so quick, everybody else is a lesser athlete that he faces. So they're all very concerned and they move with his first move. He's been effective with contact. He's been effective without contact, even using a Euro step to get left tackles to overreact and move. So he's been really fun to watch.
It's so typical Ravens, man. You draft like the edge rusher with the most question marks, and he's the best one in the class by far.
That's been cool. That's what happened at quarterback, 3 years ago.
Yes, very true. Good point. Outside of Odafe Owe, who are the other edge rushers? I know Justin Houston is still around. Mm-hmm. Obviously, had a lengthy history against the Chargers. What have you seen from him and the other edge rushers from this group?
Yeah, Houston's been good this year. He's been very consistent in terms of providing pressure from the edge. He's only had, I think, 1 sack or maybe 1.5, but he's looked good in terms of getting pressures, which is in a lot of cases even more important. He had a quarterback hit and a sack lost on Monday night to penalties, won his own on the horse collar tackle. So he's been pretty good. They missed Matt Judon more for his ability to cover and all the flexibility that provided the pass rush than they do for his pass rushing. Specifically, I think Houston's been a reasonable replacement for him as far as the quality of pass rush. Tyus Bowser came on with a 2-sack game, against Denver, and he's a guy who drops the cover more than anybody. By far, the Ravens' best coverage linebacker, which is really unusual that an outside linebacker is your best coverage linebacker and not an inside guy.
I can't think of many other situations that is the same thing. Obviously, leading up to last draft, there was a big debate: Patrick Queen, Kenneth Murray. Kenneth Murray unfortunately hurt in this game, so would have been fun to see those two on the same game. Has Patrick Queen taken the leap that Ravens fan would have hoped for this year?
No, he's been terrible. In fact, he's regressed really from a very bad rookie year. So a lot of times you want to treat these players with white gloves and say that everything's fine. It's not fine. I was saying it, all last year. At the end of last year, I'm saying, he's got to recover. He's got to do a lot better. And what he needed was a lot of positional coaching. So one of the things the Ravens did in the offseason is they brought in Rob Ryan, who's been around the block with a lot of franchises. And he came in to coach the inside linebackers. One of the things I noticed in camp is Patrick Queen is the only Ravens inside linebacker who does not play special teams. What that means is during a 20-minute segment early in practice, he had time to spend with Rex Ryan on extra things. Well, when first day at camp I was there, they were working together and Ryan is moving around a towel, showing him all kinds of things. I go, this is really positive. This is a lot of gain. As camp wore on, there's much more time spent with Queen, like leaning on a tackling donut, waiting for the other inside linebackers to get over there. That's less impressive. Yeah. So there was plenty to teach Queen. It's not like, we've seen him play this season. He does not know how to tackle properly. He doesn't wrap up. He's missed a ton of tackles. He missed a ton of tackles as a rookie, and that's been a real problem. He's a downhill coverage guy only, meaning he can try and follow a running back, maybe on a wheel route. That's a good opportunity for him to cover. But if there's anything going on behind him, he has no idea. It's like they became invisible the moment they passed his spot on the field. So doesn't read the route concepts well off the line of scrimmage to know how to maneuver to the right spot for whatever crossing routes might be occurring behind him. And I know that's very difficult. That's one of the later things you expect out of linebackers.
Right.
But I would have hoped for a lot more. So the simple answer is Queen has not worked out. And I think they're at a point almost where they have to figure out how do they sit him down in whole or in part. And in this last game, they sat him down where he would normally have played for 14 snaps, where they brought in a dime defense that did not have any inside linebackers. So they just used one defensive lineman, 4 outside linebackers, and 6 defensive backs. So they're trying to remedy it, but they can't have him on the field in passing situations.
Wow, that is brutal.
It's an indictment. Yeah.
So if we talked on your show first, of course, and you asked me, about matchups for the Chargers, right? And if I had heard you say that first, I would have immediately said Austin Eckler or Jared Cook in this one. So, we saw against the Raiders that, the running backs and the tight ends were really kind of the focus of that matchup and that game plan. So we might be seeing a similar game plan again, depending on if Patrick Queen is on the field or if he's off the field, like you're saying. So that's a tough one, man, because I liked Queen at LSU.
Yeah. The guy I wanted was Xavier McKinney, a safety. And It's not like Xavier McKinney is lighting up the field either, but he had a decent rookie year, got hurt his second year.
Right.
But unfortunately, it didn't work out. So they've got Patrick Queen. They have to make the most of it. It's unfortunate because they also spent a 3rd-round pick on Malik Harrison, and he hasn't played too well either. So he's missed some tackles, had some coverage problems. He's a guy that the Ravens really need to turn it around. And I think he's the more natural Mike linebacker of the two. He's a bigger 2-down thumper, and it would make more sense if he could be the guy to take that role. One of the big things we've seen with the Ravens this year, and I think this could well be a problem with the Chargers line, the way you described it to me, is the Colts in particular, but other teams as well, have been able to move at will into level 2, match up on blocks, get off combination blocks, get into level 2, and hold those blocks very effectively against the Ravens. So that's been something that has caused a lot of yak on screen passes, and it's been something that's caused a lot of run results that are very un-Ravens-like in terms of yards per carry.
I was looking at just the general PFF statistics, and when I saw that Jonathan Taylor had like 1 catch and it went for 76 yards and a touchdown, I was like, what happened? Because that's not his game. Like, he's not, a pass catching running back. That's Naheem Hines. So very interesting Ravens defense this year. And so sounds like Chargers fans, if you've got Austin Eckler or a tight end for the Chargers, you play him. Everyone who has Austin Eckler is playing him, but it sounds like you could be expecting a big game from number 30 there. So let's move to the secondary. You and I talked about Tavon Young. He's kind of the headliner of the secondary. What are you seeing from him this year, along with Marlon Humphrey, who's very good? And what about the rest of the other guys besides those two?
Okay, so I mean, going around, we'll start at slot corner since that's where you started. Tavon was a guy with big question mark coming into this year. He'd been hurt for 2 straight years and under a big contract. So he's in the second year of a 3-year deal where it had to be trimmed so he could even stay with the Ravens because they were going to otherwise cut him. But they found a price that they thought was agreeable, and I think he's going to make another $8 million or so next year, and they probably will have to renegotiate again. But he's made plays every game. And he's come back from his injury, been one of the Ravens' most effective defenders, and he's one of their few playmakers. He blitzes off the slot a fair amount, and he's a guy who can cover and handle whip routes with some ability. So he's a guy that I like a lot. Marlon Humphrey on the outside is their number 1 corner. They just paid him, an enormous contract, about $19 million a year. So he's a guy that has to come out. There's no other alternative, but he's also played very well. So that has been the problem. Anthony Averett had played very well until this game. It would normally be, not on the field necessarily, but has played very well. Jimmy Smith has come back and is really playing safety now. I don't think they will change that. They may. That would be the other alternative, is that if Averett's problems continue, that they'd move Jimmy Smith back to corner. But Marcus Peters, of course, an enormous loss. Before the season started, they lost Marcus Peters and Gus Edwards within one practice, within a few minutes of each other, and that has really, really hurt the Ravens season because he was their big interceptor that they don't really have a replacement for. And you guys know him from the AFC West, of course. I don't think I need to go into that, but still, he's among the top ever interceptions per 16 games played on an adjusted basis relative to the era.
Right. Just a fantastic ball hawk. You mentioned Tavon Young as a blitzer. Obviously the Ravens have a very strong reputation of blitzing. Are they blitzing at a similar level this year, or because of the injuries, are they kind of playing a little bit more coverage this year?
They have had some of each, and I think it's really more quarterback driven than like their own injuries. I think they would like to blitz as much as possible, maybe even more given what their personnel is. But they've played against Wentz, who delivers the ball pretty quickly most of the time. So they blitzed. They did a little less of all of their deceptive elements of pass rushing, which I count this. They only had one, for instance, simulated pressure against Wentz, and they only had one stunt the entire game against Wentz. And they did have 15 off-ball blitzes, but of those, they split them over 11 plays, and they basically were just doing him a favor when they blitzed. I think that they would rather have done a little bit less. But the other things that they ran, I think at 41%, 15 out of 37 comes to mind right off the bat, but of 5+ man rushes in this last game. So they still do plenty of that. I wouldn't, maybe not quite the most in the league, but pretty darn close.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see kind of the ways that they scheme up those blitzes, because it's caused the Chargers so many issues over the years. And who hasn't had struggles with Baltimore's blitzing attack? So it's been an interesting one. I'm going to ask you a similar question to the one you asked me. What's a matchup that you are confident in this week, and you can do defense and offense?
Okay, so I guess the matchup I like Hollywood Brown to be able to do some things to this defense, and there's a couple of reasons. One is I think he's the guy who can take the top off, and I think complementarily that Jackson can extend the play as needed to help get him some deep shot opportunities. So I hope that'll certainly happen. And then on defense, I like Owe against the right tackle. I also kind of like Bowser against the right tackle in this game as a guy who could create pressure opportunities. So they've got various things. Obviously, the Chargers' offensive line is pretty damn good, particularly on the left side.
Yeah.
And I think the Ravens, we talked about this a little bit on my show, may target the right B and C gaps for stunts and other blitzes that they may try and run. When the slot is on the right side, I think that gives the Ravens a good opportunity to go B or C gap from the slot with their blitz.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on for the Chargers fans, because I know Schofield and Norton is not the starting unit we expected, but you got to make do with the injuries. So Yeah, go ahead.
I made this point on our show too, how much we would love to have Michael Schofield back given the Ravens tackle problem. So, you know, he may not be a great guard for you. He'd be a great tackle for us.
It's funny how that works out. You know, another man's trash is another man's treasure, and vice versa sometimes. Because I know that, you know, there's still this negative connotation from Schofield's first tenure with the Chargers, but you know, he's a serviceable offensive lineman, and sometimes that's all you need. You know, if you can make do in other places. So, Ken, this has been great, man. Tell Chargers fans where they can find you and what you have coming up the rest of the week.
Sure. I'm at Film Study Ravens on Twitter. The website is called filmstudybaltimore.com, and all kinds of stuff about the Ravens. Chargers fans may or may not have interest, or they may just have interest this week. But if you want to read the offensive line scoring from this last week for the Ravens and figure out how the Chargers might beat that, or you want to look at what the Ravens did defensively in this last game, I'm not a homer in terms of being quite critical about the team. I love my team, but you know, they're I'm necessary amount, I think, of critical about these players. So please feel free to give me a follow or go to the site.
Well, I think we heard that pretty obviously with Patrick Queen, with the Patrick Queen assessment. But that's what we do, right? You know, you criticize those who deserve it and you praise those who deserve it, which I think is the best part about, you know, talking about these teams. So Ken, thanks so much, man. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, pleasure to be on.